Welcome to the Kuadrant community call of January the 14th, 2025. We have quite some topics and also an intent at some community call overview and guidelines. I think the best, but you tell me otherwise, Rachel, is that everybody should go through that, maybe not now, but just read through it, comment on it, unless if you want to give maybe a small summary or you want to talk about it now? Question?
Sure, I have it in as like after as a topic, but I can talk about it now if you want. I don't mind.
Yeah, yes, we have a lot, so yeah, if we let's not go too far with this, but let's do it. It's the top of the doc, so yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of just based off what was on last week's call on like how to make the community call a little bit more user friendly, and like kind of help with how if a person's adding a topic for the first time, what are the expectations, and like kind of just setting what kind of we want this call to be in, that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of how to add a topic, what the topic should be, a few guidelines on how to write them, and the things like it doesn't matter, like essentially what we talked about last week. It doesn't matter if they're not fully fleshed out. It can be POCs, it can be works in progress, just kind of stuff like that. So if you have any opinions or feedback or anything, just give a comment on the little bit, and when everyone's happy we can just leave them as like, well, I'll take off the main comment and they'll just be what's there. So that's the main thing.
Cool. Do you think we should leave them like this at the top of the document, so meaning that this would be the first thing you always would see at the top, or would we link it to another doc? So mine would be like you have to scroll quite a bit to get to the actual subjects, but at the same time, if we move it and put it in a link, half of the people won't see it. So I'm not sure, but maybe we can shorten it. I don't know. Just
yeah, I kind of
first thoughts.
Made it quite like it can be made smaller, like the headings and stuff are quite big and the font is big, but that's kind of like as a FYI, this is new here, but we can like make it smaller and like make it kind of we can, I don't mind linking up to a doc, but I think your kind of people are just not going to look at it, so it can be just made a little bit smaller.
Yes, or maybe an in-between option would be, if it turns out that it's still too much, that we have some sort of like we agree on some like the most important points and link the rest to a doc. That could be an in-between. But let's see how it turns out once we're done with that. So you're asking for feedback on this, right? From people. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, and the main objective behind it is to make it easier for people to remove any, like people think that they have to have come up with some genius thing in order to talk in this meeting. It should be make it easier for everybody to participate. Is that the main goal?
Exactly. Kind of what do we, and even I think a lot of the stuff that we were talking about last week were important, and not everyone was on that call either. So it's kind of so that's just documented as well, that things don't have to be perfect to be mentioned and all this kind of stuff.
Cool. Okay. Anybody wants to jump in? Raise your hand or just talk. Also okay. Laura.
Hey, I added a topic. I added it below the themes for the next release, but it should take less than 5 minutes, so I can maybe just run through it.
Are you trying to skip the line there?
I think I am, yeah. Is that okay?
I guess
wait till after.
That's okay.
That's no problem.
It's a pretty big line.
Yeah, but I feel like it's going to take less than 5 minutes.
Go.
Let's see if I can do it. Yeah, so we discussed the automation in particular around PRs last week. So I chatted to a few people, and I did leave this summary in a chat thread, so feel free to like read it in your own time. But I think the two main points was the use of Tide. So I did ask, we were talking about wanting consistency across, but I get a sense that like people, it makes more sense for those that are contributing to a particular repo just to decide. But I think there was some mention of maybe not using Tide, but I wasn't sure if I was remembering that correctly. So I did ask this question in the thread, and here, does anyone object to the use of Tide? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
So what is Tide?
So Tide is the automation that, like the main benefits that we're getting is it runs like batch testing. So it'll merge, if there's PRs waiting to merge, it like batches those, and also brings them up in line with where main is and runs the tests on that like version of the code rather than just the commits on the PR that may be behind the head of main. So that's like a big advantage for testing. There's other stuff, but I think that's probably the main pro for it.
So like if you haven't rebased, it'll make sure your thing is up to date with main before running the test.
Yeah, it does it in the background.
Sounds useful. I know there's some like merge queues and things like that on the repos. Is this like a duplication of that type of thing?
It does, yeah, it puts it into a pool, like a merge pool. There is
something there for that. I've seen it like when you do a merge, it's like starts queuing them.
So you might be talking about the native GitHub functionality.
Yeah.
So I've kind of listed the options basically. I've highlighted it there. Thomas, if you could just kind of highlight it. Yeah, so the options are, we can either, if people feel strongly about removing Tide, we can do that. Or if nobody feels strongly about that, we can continue to use Tide. It's only on 3 repos currently. And then we could leave the option of other repo owners or contributors to decide to use it, or alternatively, you could use the GitHub functionality that gives a very similar thing, if you're more comfortable with that.
No, I was just kind of wondering what the difference was between them.
Yeah, Mike maybe knows a bit more the nuanced detail about exactly the difference between the two of those. I think you have to like click the button in GitHub to put it into the merge queue for the GitHub one, whereas with Tide it does it. It's more sort of hidden under the hood.
Okay, so what we're saying is we kind of have a mix of tooling across the different repos to do similar things.
Yeah, exactly. So like last week we were talking about agreeing on one and doing it across all repos, but after chatting to a few people, I get a sense that like it would be fine if we, for the repo contributors, if they pick one or the other. I do have a fourth option, which is don't use any tooling, but personally I disagree with that. And I think in some cases neither is enabled on some of the repos currently.
Okay.
So if there's an action out of it, it's like pick one for your repo and put it in place.
Like I know I don't have any significant concerns if it's not going to like get in the way, I guess. Like, is there like a significant learning curve here? Like it's going to appear and then people are going to be like, how do I get stuff merged now?
I mean, like there is commands for Tide, like approve and LGTM, but like personally I find that like if there's nothing there to tell you how to merge, like so and this maybe goes to point two, like in the repos that don't use Tide, for example, we have this one team which is developers in GitHub, and anybody on that team can click the green button and merge. But like if you're maybe new to the project, it might not be clear to you like how to achieve that. But again, it's just familiarity with the tool. So that's why I'm kind of saying if people prefer to use the GitHub one or people prefer to use Tide, maybe just let the repo contributors decide for themselves.
Okay. I feel like I've used this before, but like without realizing it, like probably. Because I've used things like /approve and /LGTM, but perhaps that's just because it was there before and that's how it was done. But is this like something that Kubernetes and OpenShift also use, that type of, because I see those types of commands across like lots of repos.
Yeah, Prow is a Kubernetes. It's common on Kubernetes projects. I think some on the team have used it in previous projects as well. But it doesn't matter what the repo is doing. It's just tooling for it. The main thing is merging the commits and bringing them up to date with main under the hood to run the tests against. Like that's the main benefit.
Okay. I don't have any objection. I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, so if there's no objection to the use of Tide, then it's each repo contributor's decision then whether they want to use Tide. There is GitHub equivalent GitHub features that kind of do similar. So like I personally don't have an objection if people want to do that. but probably,
Sure. My only objection on having different ways of doing it, even though we're probably in that place right now, is from a contributor point of view.
yeah.
If I'm contributing to Quadrant, I probably want it to work all the same way.
Yeah, I mean, that's what made me bring up the point, because like I came back to the project after being away from it for a while, and I created like a similar change across a number of repos, and in each PR it wasn't clear to me like what was the best way to get that PR merged. It felt different across. So like I was advocating for consistency, but I got a sense that people didn't feel strongly about that. So I thought
Yeah,
that
but
maybe
maybe we just don't feel too strongly on what tooling we use. We just ended up with whatever was we knew and whatever was easiest to get going with.
yeah.
So maybe like I don't know how you enable it. Do you create a PR to enable it, or?
Tide there's a central repo that manages like any repo that wants to use that installation of Prow, which is what runs Tide. You just create a PR against a repo. Like I've done it a few times myself for other projects. So like it would be easy to enable, I think, across the board.
Okay.
It's just whether people want it and are comfortable with it.
So we're going to probably miss some people with this call. So I'd say like, if nobody objects on this call, then take maybe the next step, which might be like to actually send a mail to the Quadrant dev mailing list and say, we're going to enable Tide across all the repos. Say now if you don't want that, or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, I did. There is a thread about it, and that exact phrasing / question is in that thread, and nobody objected. So this is like the second raising just to make sure that nobody objects. But I can do it on the mail.
I know it's kind of old and legacy, but at least that way, if somebody comes back from PTO or parental leave, that kind of thing, they might see that subject in their email rather than like having to scroll through Slack.
Yeah. The repo for configuring Tide on Prow is administered by Red Hat. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it would cause any problems with what's the organization that we're part of? Sorry,
CNCF, yeah.
CNCF.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the use of it has any implications on that.
Yeah, I'd say go first, and then just.
I hear more positive things. People talking about Tide in this thread, so I would do that. I completely agree that we should just pick one of the two and not like have it different in different. Just make life simpler.
I think that's just emerged naturally, just by people doing things independently to get things done. You know, so
sure,
makes sense to me.
Yeah. Can we disable then the GitHub solution, or that will always be visible there, because that might also add confusion to it, or not?
I don't think that's enabled on any of the repos. It was just like an alternative option. Like I know Mike had done some investigation on it, but it was just like looked into as an alternative if we decided we weren't happy to continue with Tide.
Okay.
But I think one or the other, definitely not nothing.
Okay, that was more than 5 minutes though.
Mike has his hand up.
Mike, yeah, go.
It's fine. I was going to say something, but it's more around the naming that you keep saying. Tide is not Prow. Do you know? So I'm just what I wanted to get straight in my head is what are you talking about enabling in all the repos? Is it just Tide or all of the chat up style behavior? I assume it's the whole thing, which is actually Prow rather than Tide. And just to answer the other question, like OpenShift CI is what you're enabling, which provide an instance of Prow that we can access to get that. And Kubernetes projects have their own instance that we can't because we're not part of the Kubernetes SIG. If we were, we would be able to use their Prow instance. Anyway, that's all I'm saying. And just on the GitHub part of it, the OpenShift, the Prow and Tide part of the whole thing, in my opinion, is far better than anything GitHub has to offer yet. But that's not to say that GitHub doesn't get there in the end. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I didn't even suggest us running our own instance of Prow. I didn't think we wanted that overhead. So there is this existing one. I can skip point 2 and cover it later. I know I said like less than 5 minutes. So it's summarized here and in the thread. So if people, I don't want to like take all the time. So we can maybe discuss it off the call rather than getting into that one here.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, let's because I think this one is the second one is also an interesting topic to talk about. If we don't get to it, we just get to it next week. But yeah, yes. I would say let's spend the rest of the call talking about all of this themes to the next release. That's okay with you.
Just so we don't forget, maybe we need to move that into the backlog. That's the second item.
Yes, can you do that, Laura?
Yep, I can take care of that.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so it's a pretty long list in the end on themes for the next release, right? So independently, kind of, I want, like, we had some conversation about, yeah, when will that be? As soon as I mean, we'll see. Like, I think this is more about, like, where do we think that we should work? What are the things that we think we should work on? And then, like, the next exercise would probably be ordering that and what's more important and what's less important, we think. So I'm wondering how best to do this. Maybe I think everybody knows themselves what they added. And maybe then each person can just open their mic and explain a bit and the part they added, starting at the top. Does that make sense? Or anybody has a better idea?
Yeah, I think though, as we go through each item, we should decide. Obviously, it's important enough for someone to write it down, so it's probably important enough to make sure there's a GitHub issue that reflects that desire. And that doesn't need to be marked for 1.1, but it should be in our backlog, ready to be prioritized, right? Unless we kind of say, hey, actually that's already done, right? So we don't need to do that. Then then the action from each of these should probably, whoever created it, go and actually create a GitHub issue or find one to update to reflect your desire and requirements.
Yes, great, good idea.
Which is why I took all my name off all the ones that were.
Okay. Who wrote the first one?
I'm guessing it was Craig. No name inside it.
I don't think this was actually me.
No, that was me.
Okay.
But can we skip me? Because I did this, I think, slightly differently than what other people had put there. Like, to me, yeah, I tried to focus on a theme rather than actual action items per se, on what is it that, anyways, whatever. I'm failing at this, so I don't think I should. I should shut up.
Okay, fair. We can skip. I still think it might be still interesting. Okay, until where should we skip?
Well,
It was literally the first bullet point. The one underneath, as you can see, has some, and I won't push anybody under the bus, but somebody that talked on this call goes by LF.
Yeah,
And that's not me.
I think that's me. So I didn't add the high level out of the box, but just again, because I'm sort of back to the project after a break, it's something that's just been on my mind anyway. So I did discover one item which I added, and probably could just be automatically converted to an issue in GitHub, but basically the quick start completed and some of the components weren't up and running for. It was a memory issue on my machine, but it could be anything that could cause some of the components not to come up. So maybe just some additional checks on, Author is running. Before we say, hey, you can go over to the next step on the.
I might be able to help and listen more. So just an FYI, we're removing the quick start, or the quick start has been removed from the doc side, and the getting started has been updated as well. And it might solve what you're saying there specifically, because we do a check on the Kuadrant CR to see is everything actually running. And with system components, or did you mention resources? You haven't updated memory or anything, or did I imagine that? Was that something you mentioned?
Yeah, no, I fixed it. That was the cause, but
okay,
really, the cause wasn't important. It was that the quick start completed without,
I got you.
Ready.
If there are some minimum requirements, though, we could probably throw them into the getting started. Say, hey, you should probably have this kind of requirements if you're going with the local client setup. So, but yeah, I wanted to let you know about the quick start being removed and some recent updates to the doc site on the getting started flow. So we can chat after if you want, or if you want to have a look at that, then reach out. That'd be good.
Yeah, maybe I missed like a PR or something if this changes. So yeah,
It's only today, like that those changes landed.
But yeah, we can talk offline about that one. But I think generally it's a good high level point. You know, I don't know, is it like specific tickets we want to fill in under that, or just keep it in mind across the board that onboarding should always be
Agreed. Yes.
optimal.
Wasn't it Head and Shoulders that said you never get this second chance to make a first impression? Yes. Definitely. Agreed. And probably there are more items, and you are the perfect person to see all these things, Laura, because coming back after some time.
It probably makes sense, Laura, if you would look at what Dave has been talking about and see does that actually solve your requirements, and if not, add some more tickets to expand.
Jim, you had your
Can't
hand
hear
up.
you, Jim, if you're talking.
I would know.
Yes.
Right, okay. I had loads of issues today. If that quick start guide has been removed, can we get an issue created for that? Because I kind of knew about this last week, but I had no reference to it. And there is a number of issues in the Quadrant operator backlog that reference problems in the quick start guide. But I had no way of saying that we were going to close it because this was being removed as I had nothing to link to. Like, I know, like, if there's a PR there now, that's kind of all right, yeah. But it would be nice to have an issue saying why this was going to be removed in the first place.
I can send you a link to the PR, which has context and links back to an issue about some of the changes, not specifically the quick start removal. That might be helpful. If there are issues that reference to quick start, do send them on to me as well, or we can chat about that after and see what the best course of action is with those.
Yeah, but like, this is probably not it's not the only problem with what I'm trying to point out. Is there was work being worked on where something was going to be removed, but there was no issue that was highlighting to people that this was going to happen until it happened.
Okay, it's like it's cool, yeah.
That makes sense.
I don't know. I wouldn't say that. Like, there was a whole epic around doc stuff. Not to get defensive here, but before the break we talked about docs revamp stuff, and we gave the opportunity for people to jump in on that and get involved. So we have an epic with lots of issues, and item is one of the things we discussed more recently. Yeah, I won't get over defensive, but let's get things right then. Let's set things straight here, and we'll see about those other issues you mentioned as well.
Could be a time of year type thing as well, right? Where a lot of people have had a big gap and may have forgotten about some of the things that were there before versus after.
For it, that people are aware of things, what's happening, and things don't happen out of the blue without other people knowing. That will always sometimes happen, of course. But yes, agreed. It's outside of the scope of this conversation, but I've made a note of it. Let's continue. Consistent user experience with observability, metrics, logs, and tracing. That's you again, Alex, or not?
Yeah, that's me.
Pretty concrete, this one, no?
I guess. I'm not sure. Like, yeah, I guess. Well, there's many action items that would come out of that, I think, and many decision making that needs to happen. I'm gonna say a bad word, but when I wrote that, it was actually, can we all agree that's a desirable goal? Sort of have a shared understanding of what this could look like, and then possibly make it a reality and keep it a reality as well. The thing is, since I had very kind words for somebody on this call or a little earlier today, we need there's a dependency to that. There's some work that needs to happen before we can get to making that happen. But Adam's kicking ass and taking names. And so I think we'll be able to start doing more fun stuff soon. That was weird, huh? Everything I said again. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're all
Right.
weird.
Drugs, what they do to your brain.
Hey, but can you color it in a little bit more? What you mean? Because I know because you
So
told me.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I can say. So I have an idea that I want to test out, and it's effectively using all the tracing stuff. And when I say tracing, I mean the distributed tracing. So that means the metrics, where metrics are events and logs and everything gathered. When somebody deploys their stuff locally, right? But instead of sending them to a collector, hopefully people know what I'm talking about. What I was thinking of doing is gather all that stuff inside the WASM shim, send it back to the WASM shim, and make it available to whomever is calling into the cluster in some way. So one example that I can use, I don't know how many people have done Rails development, and me quoting that is weird, but in the meantime, when you start doing Rails development and shit hits the fan, or let's talk about Red Hat stuff, Quarkus, right? You deploy your Quarkus app and it can't connect to the database. You'll get, in development mode, you'll get an error message as part of the page you requested, the endpoint you hit, or whatever. Well, I sort of achieve the same thing for Kuadrant. So that you do, I don't know, you deploy your app foobar and you have an endpoint there, you can hit it, and in case something goes wrong, you'll get part of the 500, like a real nice explanation of what happened for you to look into. And what I was planning to use for doing that was actually all the trace, all the spans that we used throughout the tracing. And you could even move this entirely to the user's app as well. Yeah, that's okay. Forget about I ever said that. But let's say for our stuff, we could do that and send that as part of the response. I think, Rachel, you're the one that had a problem with timing out going to the Redis that's set on the other side of the globe with the defaults, right? So you didn't see what you expected as a result. But it's because you had a failure scenario where your thing said, like, let the thing go through. So, but it's still not what you expect. And I don't think you should discover all that by yourself by reading, going on the channel, whatever. It would be nice if we could give, like, in that case, in development mode, instead of letting you go through, it actually gives you an explanation of what happened. Or you can get to that explanation. I don't know, like pass question mark debug equals lol, and you would get like that information back, right? There's more things that we can do. Have all the trace data always available in the headers of the response. There's many things that we could do. Yeah, anyways, that would be step one. And then there's more fun stuff that we could do. Yeah, I think it would deserve an RFC. So I think David just sent that out. I agree. What the way I wanted to go about this is, sorry, Adam, wait for Adam to finish his work because it requires a whole lot of plumbing inside the WASM shim. And I wanted to do POC as part of that. I don't know. Maybe I'm on drugs. That would make sense with what I said earlier. I think I can get something working for a few scenarios in probably a couple of days, and then use that to iterate on, demo, like discuss and do the RFC. So yes, Dave, that was more or less my intent. Sorry, I shut up. That's what I mean by all this.
Thanks. Cool.
Craig, sorry, somebody has their hands up, but
Craig.
I don't.
Yeah. I have an issue there for debugging and troubleshooting guides, and I think what Alex just described probably covers quite a lot of what I was trying to convey as well. So we might want to put that up underneath that.
Yeah, I
item.
saw that, and I
Yeah.
think it would make for a good bullet point underneath that one or alongside that one.
You see
Also,
it there, Thomas? I can do it here.
to add another thing, one advantage I saw in leveraging all that to do that was that all the information people would see in development would look alike the information they would see when they go to production and send that to the collector, right? It, like, again, why give 12 different experience to the user depending on where they're doing their work?
Yep. I do think that one's really important. Personally, I think that's probably why I ended up writing it twice. Even like from a user experience point of view, it's really important, but also from our point of view, because if people have issues and we're trying to understand what's actually going on, if we don't have tools to say, okay, turn on this flag, send a request, give me the output, we're basically just going to be like pointing in the dark at things. So yeah, I think that's pretty important.
Thanks. Next. Better support for common installation requirements, moving needs for messy patches.
That's fine. Yeah. So I've been working with Roy a little bit around like what a production installation might look like for Kuadrant, using his experience as SRE. And we've got a pretty good repo coming together that shows how to achieve some of the things that we feel like Roy would feel is needed, and most people that were deploying this probably would platform engineers or system engineers, whatever way you want to name them. But things like being able to configure MTLS, HA, as in running multiple instances of Auth3No and limited or across multiple availability zones. Yes, there's problems with traffic there, but Istio can actually do some pretty smart things there too, with locality-based load balancing, setting requests and limits, setting topology constraints, all that kind of stuff is like quite common. I don't know if you want to call it day 2 stuff, or day 1 even. But if you click through that link, you'll see it's not easy to achieve right now. You can achieve some of it, which is good, and at least there's a way to do it, but it's quite messy and requires like directly patching objects that are not maybe meant to be patched directly in the Kuadrant world. But yeah, so that's the theme. Yeah, Alex.
I think key is what you said towards the end, right? Patching stuff that maybe people shouldn't patch, or that we make, I'm not sure how to say. Like, I think we had the discussion in the past, I don't even remember, but let's say, example given, right? The limited door deployment goes away because there is no rate limit policies to enforce. And you're like, yeah, I don't need it. Like, so I can save that. But then if you restore it and it was patched, like to do something, then you break those promises. So I'm in favor of actually letting people patch things the way that they want it to be, because otherwise you end up surfacing all that stuff all the way up, because there's always be somebody that needs to do something weird. That being said, so that's one thing. But that aside, I think we should indeed do things a whole lot better, say with regards to HA, right? So what does HA mean? And I don't want to even open that debate here necessarily right now, but if the user could convey how they expect their system to behave, right? We could then also make sure that that promise holds or not, right? So say they want to do HA and they do, I think, literally what's said there, and you have limited door in 2 different zones, but they all talk to the same Redis at the same place using the synchronous Redis. Oh,
yep.
I don't know how many people know about how that stuff works, but whatever. And talks to that, you don't have an HA system, right? So you think you have it, but you don't have it. So yes, it's complicated to patch things properly. I don't think we should prohibit users to patch things, though. That being said, I think we need to make back to the point above, right? Things easier for people to get to where they need to go.
Yeah, and I think like being consistent about how you do it, because like there's in that example, there's places where you can't do like GitOps. You have to create you have to do like an actual patch command directly against the deployment that's been created by another resource that's actually owned by a different operator. And yeah, as it happens, it doesn't overwrite it right now. But like having a consistent way of doing this type of configuration and saying these are the rules that we're going to obey, I think is really important.
Thanks. Next one is also yours, right? Increase DNS
Yep.
scalability.
Yeah. So we have like some things that we feel would improve the ability for the DNS to be able to scale beyond the current limit. As we have options of using backend stores for rate limiting, we thought it may be useful to also potentially plug into that store if it's there, so that we could store potentially a lot more. We could scale a lot further than the TXT records and the zone files will let us scale at this point. So that's what that's about, really. And then the other piece is more of an enhancement, I guess, to the health checks, which we didn't get around to for 1.0, which is when we spot something as being unhealthy, actually remove it, have the rules and logic in place to actually remove it from the zone rather than just flag it as unhealthy. So that's that. I'll make sure there's issues for that stuff if there isn't already.
No comments? Okay, let's move on. I think the header tech tab was added by Alex, if I remember correctly, and then other people added concrete things to it, right?
Yep. I guess
So
so.
let's see.
So with the release stuff, like, to be fair, and it's easy to create a release, but it's also, well, maybe I'm just an idiot, but it's also quite easy to get it wrong sometimes. So it's very easy to create the release, but it's also very easy to create a wrong release, and then you have to go create it again. So just improving that so that it's a little less error prone. At the time of release, I had to trigger 2 different workflows because the follow-on trigger wasn't working properly. They're all relatively small things, but like quality of life type improvements that would like help people's sanity when dealing with some of this stuff. I personally also am not a massive fan of the fact that we have inputs for the versions, and I would rather like have a static file that we just create PR and say, here's the versions we're going to create for this release, we use for this release, and use that file when you kick off the release. That's like, to me, a little bit more sane, and you don't have to keep remembering, do I need to put a V in front of this one or not? That kind of thing. So yeah. That's kind of stuff. I have captured some of that in my notes from the V1 release, Thomas. It's fairly like ad hoc right now, and I need to kind of collect it and put it into something more readable. But I just took like a bunch of bullet points like that, right, down. And then upgrades. So we have a V1, which means if you install it, you should be able to upgrade to the next version and not have to delete and reinstall. So upgrades are pretty important. Upgrade testing will naturally happen downstream, but we should also do some form of upgrade testing upstream in an automated way. So being able to basically test that when I create a release candidate or release, that you can install the old version and then move to the new version and the right images are in place. You know, really small kind of sanity check that, hey, yeah, the upgrade actually happened and the right versions are in place. That would be enough at this point, I think, to say, right, that's the foundation, right? So yeah, that's that one. I've been talking to Aguski in the background a little bit about some of that. We've got some possible ideas. Jim?
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong, but did I not hear somewhere that we weren't going to be concerning ourselves with upgrades in Kuadrant? That was only going to be downstream too.
Yes, you heard right. You just missed the end of that sentence, which is we won't be concerning ourselves with upgrades until V1.
Right. Okay. All right. Oh, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. There was no contract before V1, right? Now we have a contract, so That's it.
Yeah,
Can I
I'm just,
Oh, sorry, Jim.
yeah, I'm just a little concerned that we probably should start concerning ourselves with upgrades the version before V1, so that we had a try run of doing upgrades before we needed to do upgrades. That's just personal opinion.
There were upgrades before, and then they got taken back out because it was like a headache to release that we didn't need at that point in time.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
Next one is yours, I think, Jim.
Yeah. So from the State of the World work, there was one issue that we didn't get to before V1, which is handling non-recoverable errors. So if the API server gives back like 500s or rate limits us in some fashion, the Quadrant operator today is not handling that very well, kind of not doing anything with it. So that is technical debt that we need to solve. I think that's kind of for the next release. We need to get that one done. It's more, it's there that we know we have to do it. And it's kind of, everybody now knows how we need to do it. So.
Yep. Thanks. Next one. You want to take that, David? Or Rachel? Or Jason?
I don't mind. Yeah. So there's an Epic link there, and this work is ongoing. And just to give a bit of context where this came from, we wanted to make it easier for people to write, contribute, maintain docs. And out of that, I think it was Jason who came across a particular framework, and we used that framework to start to put a bit more structure on our doc site, particularly the nav on the left-hand side. And out of that, we started to see some particular changes we wanted to make as well. So that Epic encompasses a lot of that. Ultimately, it'll all come back to, hey, you want to add some new docs or you want to maintain some docs. Here's what you need to know so that it's easier for you to do that. So that's the goal. And out of it will be a restructured doc site. Hopefully makes things easier for users of Quadrant upstream. Yeah.
Okay. No, let's continue. We're running out of time anyway, but we'll see. David, again.
I'll defer this one to Jason if Jason's still on the call. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'll be quick with this one. There's a link in here to some of our console plugin V1 and V1.1 Quadrant release and beyond sort of stuff. So I have that in a little discussion that I created in the repo. There's a bunch of links to a bunch of different things. The TLDR is there's a couple of things for V1 that we kind of punted out of the console plugin because APIs and things weren't stable. Shift and sans, things like that. Like there's no an example, there's no form view for editing your auth policies and rate limit policies because they're a bit more complex. We want to get back, design them, and build those out and pick that stuff up. Make sure we didn't drop it. There's a couple of other things that are there too in terms of quality of life stuff around the topology view, things like that as well. So that's a big list of enhancements there. That some of it we will do for V1.1. I don't think we've given a firm date or cutoff as to what we can do. Whatever fits, we'll cut off at that point. But some of that stuff will get into the release of V1.1 that will include the console plugin. Yeah, so I've read it.
Thank you. Dave, observability things.
Yeah, observability things. So I think I've everything captured in GitHub issues here. So a lot of these are, let's say, usability things, making it easier for people installing Quadrant to get the observability pieces in place. So going down the list, the first one is having some flag to drop in all the service monitors for all the components into the right places, so that if you have a Prometheus instance in your cluster, it'll start scraping all the metrics. That's the first one. Second one, similar but for tracing, where you set some fields in one single place, such as the Quadrant CR, and then something happens and all the tracing stuff is enabled, sending stuff to the same OTLP collector. Next one is something we had on the agenda for a while now. We haven't come around to it yet, but a gateway metrics exporter. It's kind of extending what metrics we can get from about gateway API resources. And this will allow us to get some missing stuff that we haven't been able to get so far, in particular per listener status. In the gateway itself, we weren't able to get them currently. We're limited to like the overall gateway status or the HTTP route status. So that will enable us to get a bit more detail on the metrics. There's a couple of POCs as well. One is, again, usability focused. It's configuring, like if you have a Grafana instance, we're not going to provide one, but if you have a Grafana instance, you can tell us that via the Kuadrant CR, and then some other things will happen. If, for example, you use the console plugin, we can add in links to some dashboards in some of our example dashboards if you have them in your Grafana from the console plugin, that kind of thing. I'll pause there for Naguski to jump in case it's related to this topic.
No. I just wanted to say that out of those listed things, observability things, there is one more I would like to highlight. Is I think it was mentioned in some other item in the list of things we've been talking about. It's the metrics from the gateway, but particularly from the WASM module. We've been working. We started. There is some issues. GitHub issues. I started working on that, trying to make it to V100, but we had few issues from the library we use to expose the metrics. There were some things not available, especially for the testing side. So we couldn't make it on time, but there is a going on work regarding that. So exposing metrics from the WASM. This is interesting because when relimiting is not happening, you may get data or information from limitador, but you could also be not relimiting because limitador is not available. So the metrics from the gateway, it's also valuable on this regard. So just to mention that.
Cool. Do you have the issue for that, Hanley?
Yes, sure. Yeah, sure.
I'd like to read that.
I was looking for that actually.
Cool. Well,
Okay,
while you grab that, I'll mention the last item in the list there. So, we started POC during the hackathon. A few of us got together. We did this metrics access control POC, trying to restrict access to metrics and also restrict access to certain dashboards, depending on some permissions, some RBAC. We got so far with some of that, but there's more that needs to be done there. It's still kind of in the proof of concept stage to kind of see, is that actually possible? Well, it is possible, but how much work to make it possible? There's a few things to figure out. So continuation of that.
Thank you. No reactions. Let's continue. I guess that's Jim, right? You want to take the next one, Jim?
Yeah, sure. Yesterday I opened an RFC. The idea of it is to try get a standardized API for the Kuadrant CR. Since it is looking very likely that we will be adding multiple features to the Kuadrant CR over the next while, it would be very good if we had like a constant design for it, where each feature is not using its own style. I have linked to like any of the RFCs that like are currently kind of open on it. I didn't have any links for service manager stuff at the time. It would be good if people can have a look. I know some people are already after mentioning some stuff on it, but I think it's something that is important for a unified story.
Thank you. Yes, I'm thinking about a better word if it should be like style book or like, if design is the right word, but it doesn't matter. I'll read the RC. Yes, makes sense. Targets for this year. That's CO2, right? Yes.
Yeah, it was curiosity. Like, I know the BU is going to come and tell us what they want, but then it's like, are we planning on adding more gateway provider support and DNS provider support in this year? And if so, what platforms are we going to try support?
Yeah, I was talking with that first one with Adam today, like how it would be interesting to continue there, looking into Google, for example. But yeah, I'd say yes, but I agree with you that it's gonna have to compete with a lot of other stuff. So I don't know where it comes out in the list order-wise. I don't know. Anybody else?
On the DNS provider front, I think there's two opportunities this year. One is to add some form of support for core DNS via the cluster inside the cluster, that then the user's DNS servers point at for records. That will help with things like enterprises when they don't use like a cloud provider DNS, and they have their own DNS server, for instance. So you can set up your own core DNS on the cluster and then have your records resolved or stored via that core DNS. So that's one piece. And the other one I would say is potentially looking to allow the DNS policy to be offloaded to external DNS for some use cases. So external DNS this kind of ties into more providers, but it has like a lot of providers in there. But the DNS operator supports much more complex DNS configuration, but for simple configuration, you could offload that to external DNS. So you could potentially get a lot more integration by having an external DNS in the cluster and then saying, create the DNS record for me, but hand it off to external DNS at that point. So it would still be DNS policy, Kuadrant operator, DNS record, right? But the actual thing handling the DNS record would change at that point. Those are two things that are potential this year, I would say.
Maybe add them to the doc. Correct. So summarized like in sub bullet points.
Yeah, sure.
Another thing I wanted to say about the gateway provider support, I think it's also just strategically story-wise important for Kuadrant, because it illustrates our story, and it gives us a good place also in the conversations that we're having about the policy attachment and how that just is independent of which gateway you use, and it makes for a better story if we support more than what we do now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would like to see us sort of make sure that we're stable with Envoy Gateway and that we have like a good pattern for particularly testing and maintaining those integrations, so that when we add more, it's like, okay, so it's just do these things, right? Because each one obviously introduces some more cost.
Yes, great. Okay, next we're gonna not make it, but investigation. I don't know who added it, but
yeah. So that was me, and Mike's after being started to talk on it, so you probably spoke.
Okay, Dave, you want to quickly AI gateway?
Yeah, I don't have any cohesive story around this one, but it's more so to see if anyone else has been thinking about this, any AI gateway like features. But yeah, take what you want from that, and then just linking to the video and the repo where I do something together to get some LLM metrics recently. So if anyone has any ideas around AI gateway like features that might fit into what we're doing, yeah, let's chat, and maybe it's something we can kind of hop on the bandwagon with to get a bit of publicity or something. I don't know.
There has been some discussion, Dave. I think the main feature that's emerged has been the idea of rate limiting and on counters. Tokens, sorry, if I'm using the right terminology.
Yeah, I saw someone mention that. Yeah, that could be an interesting thing to kind of put together.
Go.
Yeah, so if we do that, I think with the work that you've done, Dave, it's actually done. I know it sounds weird, but effectively all this quote unquote there is just put thing. Yeah, you've done it all. We're done. All right, cool. Next project. It's tying it all together that becomes not necessarily interesting, because doing it is actually just banging on the keyboard and it's done. But like there's been some ideas floating around to sort of enable more custom stuff to happen on the data plane. And I think looking at this problem from that perspective would be great, because it's the first one we can go, yeah, sure, we can do it and do all the plumbing ourselves, which isn't necessarily a bad idea, but we could leverage that to sort of find out how we could expose a lower level API to actually achieve those things that we would actually use ourselves to achieve the, let's say, the LLM rate limiting policy or whatever you want to call it, right? So compose it versus then just getting it to work. I think that'd be really great.
Are there a few words you could write down to capture that? I'm not fully grasping what you're saying.
Yeah,
I think I get the
yeah.
idea, but it'd be good to discuss a bit more. Yeah.
So what other people have used as a word for that is custom policy SDK. And I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And I will write those words down, but end of next week, once I had myself meetings with other people, see if that's on the list of things to do or whatever, and then what we could do about it. And then I can put some thoughts down, like in an issue on that. But if otherwise, if you want to talk about it or whatever, whenever. But yeah, let's say to put an official ticket down, I'd like to hold off another 10 days. Well, I think, yeah, 10 days.
Okay. Thanks everybody for adding ideas here. Please try to, if there's something that you wrote down that is convertible to into an issue, do it. To be continued, I would say. And we have another community call next week before we actually talk downstream with product, so we can work out things a bit more even. Before things might get added to this list. We can talk about order, maybe.
Just says, well, if you're adding something, if there's an obvious area that it fits under, just add that, because it makes it a little bit easier to sort through things. But you know, I'm not saying stress over it, but like if there's an area drop down, and if there's an obvious area, then just add it into that.
In GitHub, you mean? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That makes sense. Okay. We're over time. Thank you all for participating, and see you next time. Bye.